Okay, hello. So I just wanted to talk about the Crypto Queen, the podcast done by the BBC. Really, really good. My brother recommended me this one. I'd never heard anything about it before, didn't know anything about the story at all. But it's just a really, really interesting podcast. It's really well produced, really well put together. The music is fantastic in it. Really adds a sense of kind of haunting sort of underlying threat and sinisterness. It's really, really good. So whenever I do these reviews, I don't like to give too much away. I don't like to give too many spoilers away, because I think that's a bit of a shame. But it's very sinister. It's very sort of eye-opening. If it's something you don't know anything about, then absolutely give it a listen, because you won't necessarily. I wasn't shocked necessarily. I kind of knew this sort of stuff went on, but the level and the extent to which it goes on, as portrayed by this book, is really quite amazing and frightening. So it's basically this cryptocurrency called OneCoin that was brought out, and it's suggested, and I'm going to say suggested because I don't want to get murdered, it's suggested that it is a fake thing, and that people have been conned basically and ripped off. So they've got loads of people to invest, and the figures are absolutely amazing. So across Britain, Europe, across the world, they've just got so many millions. I think it's about 4 billion or so that people have invested, and they reckon that they've just disappeared with, because the idea is that they keep saying they're going to release the money at some point and people are going to get their massive payments and things, but they never seem to actually do it. And it's basically this idea, it's like a pyramid scheme. So they mention other sort of well-known pyramid schemes there are, such as Herbalife and things like that, just as an example. And it's just this idea that you get these people who are kind of taken in, potentially, who fully believe that it's going to pay out, and they get really involved, and they get other people to invest and their family to invest, and they stand up on stage and they're really kind of enthusiastic and charismatic, and it's like a bit of a cult, or it comes across as a bit of a cult anyway in this podcast. I'm going to remain neutral on it for the sake of this review, because like I say, I've only heard the podcast, I haven't actually done any other sort of research, so it wouldn't really be fair to me for me to be too biased about it. But if the podcast is true, which it appears to be, if it is true, then it's really quite frightening. And there's another book that I read a little while ago, book, not a podcast, called Moneyland by Oliver Buller, I think, or Bullough, I think is how you spell it, I seem to recall. And I remember being a little bit bored by that book, actually. It was good. It was very informative, and this guy's always done a lot of research on, it's called Moneyland, so it's about this idea that money just disappears into Moneyland, and people disappear their money deliberately, obviously, to keep it safe from the tax man and from whoever else, basically, from, I don't know, husbands and wives who want to divorce them and take it all, or what have you. And it's this idea that money's always been hidden for years. There was a time when there was a basic way of doing it, sticking it in the ground, but the trouble is you've got to then find it and sort of dig it up again and whatever. But this is a really kind of clever system, really corrupt system, where rich people manage to hide their money and put it into different things, and it's this vast sort of network of riches, potentially corrupt money that just gets disappeared into this world where these people, they all have the right connections, and it's kind of mafia style stuff, really. But there was this main woman called Dr. Ruja, and I cannot remember the second name now, and that's probably a good thing, but you can research it yourself at the end of the day. You can look it all up. It's OneCoin. It's all that they're still operating, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware. So that might suggest that it can't be that corrupt, or the government and the authorities are just failing to do anything about it, or don't have any interest in doing anything about it, because maybe they're getting paid as well, who knows. But it's Dr. Ruja something. I probably wouldn't be able to pronounce her name anyway, even if I can remember it, so you can look her up. There's a few videos on YouTube of her being really charismatic on stage and charming everyone. It's a really intelligent, capable woman who there's an example of a woman in the podcast called Jane, who's a Scottish lady who was completely taken in by it, or says that she was taken in by it, and she invested quite a lot of her own money, a fair few thousand of her own money, but she also managed to convince family and friends to invest $250,000 in total. And she's sort of talking about it, and she breaks down the time, she's crying, just kind of saying that looking back she thinks she was really silly, and she had this guy who was a bit of an expert, a bit of an undercover sort of researcher on the phone to her, and they play the footage from that, and he's there saying to her it's fake, blah blah, and she's really giving it back to him and sort of saying, how dare you, leave me alone. She sort of genuinely believes that he's a hater and that he doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's just trying to sort of wind her up or upset her because he's jealous and what have you. And she genuinely kind of at the time believes that, and she's sort of looking back on it and saying, my god, I feel terrible about it. She even says she has to live with it, so she must feel absolutely terrible that if she genuinely has wasted this money and it has been taken, $250,000, my god. And she talks about the fact that her dad was a working class man who used to go down the mines, and obviously you go down the mines, you work your arse off, you work your backside off, and she managed to leave them a little bit of money, and she thought she was doing the right thing with it to provide more money for her family, but it turns out that she wasn't, because she lost it all, and so that's pretty devastating really. And I should imagine she's probably suffering pretty severely with her mental health over it. I mean, most people would after doing something like that, so you do feel pretty sorry for her, although lots of people would suggest she was pretty greedy and pretty foolish. But I suppose giving a little bit of sympathy to people like that, you know, it's surprising how people can be taken in by certain things really, and the sort of people who do these things, if they are corrupt and fake, are very clever. And you don't have to be a stupid person necessarily to be taken in by it. You know, if the right sort of things are said at the right time in the right context, and you're just at the right point in your life where you're prepared to maybe take a bit of a chance or something, then you can see really it's not beyond the realms of imagination to sort of realise that, you know, plenty of people can be taken in. You know, day to day we believe stuff that we're told to a certain extent in the news and what have you. And even if you're really quite objective and critical, which I like to think I am, there are still certain things that you sort of take for granted to a certain extent that may not be necessarily true. So I think you have to show a certain amount of sympathy to this woman really. She did something wrong, she made a mistake, and now she's really, really severely paying the price for it. So probably for the rest of her life, unfortunately, which is terrible, you know. So, but it's really, really interesting. Like I say, it's produced really well. I can't remember the name of the guy now, but again, you can look it up. But it's this main guy with his female partner there, who they kind of do most of the narration and the undercover stuff, and they go around looking for this Dr. Ruja woman at the end. And I won't give it away, but they work really hard to try and find her and stuff, and they have these different leads and potentially, and music's really good. Like I said at the beginning, it's quite creepy and stuff. But yeah, I definitely recommend it as just a purely entertaining listen really. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, I listen to a lot of books on Audible, and I read as well. That's generally what my reviews are for the books that I either read or listen to. But podcasts, when they're good, I listen to The Sun King as well, David Dimbleby. That was about Rupert Murdoch. That was really, really good as well. I think I've done a review somewhere on that as well. So some of these podcasts are great, and it kind of compares to that one a little bit actually. The way it's produced and the sort of music and the soundtrack kind of does compare to that. So yeah, really, really good, fascinating story, fascinating thing that's going on. I'll leave it for you to research it, have a look at it, and come to your own conclusions. But yeah, very, very interesting.